Welcome to Desperately Seeking the 80s. I am Meg.
And I am Jessica. And Meg and I have been friends since 1982. We got through middle school and high school together here in New York City, where we still live.
And where we podcast about New York City in the 80s. I do Ripped from the Headlines.
And I do pop culture. I think that it is very important that we honor our longtime listeners. So I would like to extend a hearty birthday greeting and sending of love from both of us to longtime listener, never time caller.
Because we don't take calls.
Exactly. Busy. We love you.
Happy birthday, Busy.
Happy birthday.
Hope you're having a good one right now.
Yeah. Woo-hoo.
My engagement question for you, Jessica. Did you have action figures in your youth?
I had one Barbie.
Oh, does she count? Was she active?
No. I mean, her joints were movable.
When I think of action figures...
You're thinking John had a G.I. Joe.
Okay, there.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
very active.
Very active. In fact, so much so... the day.
He did something bad, didn't
No,
he?
No. Not at all. He did something bad to Barbie. He ripped her head off and threw it under the radiator where it melted.
That doesn't mean anything.
But I was laughing. No, he had a G.I. Joe, and the G.I. Joe came with a parachute, and it was supposed to work, but of course, unlikely.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I recall, and I hope this isn't like some weird Mandela effect, but it was a yellow, very thin plastic parachute with strings. And somehow, if you held it in just the right way at the right height, he was supposed to float down. P.S. No dice. So basically,
but many hours fun trying to get it to happen.
We threw G.I. Joe off the top bunk of the bunk beds for hours, and were genuinely perplexed about its non-functional
aerodynamic
quality. Yeah, I was like,
qualities.
that's a giant hunk of plastic covered in fabric and a really thin, tiny tent. Never gonna happen.
You have reminded me, we didn't have Barbies or anything like that when I was growing up. That was not acceptable in my home.
I had the one Barbie because she came with the Barbie plane, and we've talked about it on this podcast. I loved the plane, but Barbie, no one had any use for her.
Okay, so I did not have Barbies. I did not have action figures. Neither did Toby, because that wasn't really my parents' aesthetic.
Okay.
But
did you like hand carved wooden toys from Sweden?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
But my Aunt Seal and Uncle Charlie didn't get the memo.
Love that.
So at Christmas, we would often get big plastic, cool ass stuff from Uncle Charlie and Aunt Seal. And once, I'm sure Toby was given it. Why would they give it to me? But, you know, he was very generous. We got an Evel Knievel action figure on the bike. And I'm going to tell you what else. No, I'm going to finish my sentence, Jessica. We had the thing that you crank up and you pull the motorcycle back, and then he rides and he flips around in this death-defying maneuver. That's what we got for Christmas.
That was one of the coolest toys of all time.
I know.
And I remember the ad. And I don't know if I have created a memory or if John actually had it. I know that he was obsessed with Evel Knievel, as all children were at that time. So now I'm going to have to call John and just be like, dude, go back in your mind palace.
I'll tell you something that will excite you.
Tell me.
It worked. Sometimes he would fly off the track, but really, for the most part, this was a functional dream toy.
When I was just in Las Vegas, how's this for random? Not on the main strip, but kind of off. There's a bar or a club, a bar that is Evel Knievel themed.
Hmm.
Yes.
Can we really do an Evil Knievel? Evil Knievel didn't come to New York. We should look into it. Maybe he passed through
Madison Square Garden.
There you go.
I'm again, is this a created memory? I don't know, but I have a memory of Evil Knievel.
That's a
jumping things in Madison Square Garden.
Segue for my story.
All right, hit it.
My sources are WWE.com, Mr. McMahon, which is a documentary series on Netflix right now. Oh, my lordy people. It's cray-cray. And a bunch of really fun YouTube clips. This entire story, as my baseball story did, comes under the category of stuff Meg knew absolutely nothing about until she started looking into it.
All right, I'm psyched.
So, on June 16th, 1984, professional wrestling star Rowdy Roddy Piper introduced Queens native Cyndi Lauper on his talk show Piper's Pit, which was filmed in front of a studio audience in Poughkeepsie, New York. Wrestling star Lou Albino crashed the interview, howling that he was responsible for Cindy's success, that he'd written all her songs, and that, quote, all women were nothing and slime. The altercation escalated, and before the live studio audience knew what was happening, Cyndi had kicked her chair over and was pummeling 350-pound Lou Albino over the head with her purse.
There's nothing like a woman hitting someone with her purse.
To settle the score, they challenged each other to a wrestling match using proxies. Wendy Richter would represent Cyndi in the ring, and the fabulous Moolah would fight for Lou. MTV.
I'm so sorry. Isn't this the second time someone has been named Moolah on this podcast?
Wait.
There is that woman
who thought that. No, it was what Ivana Trump thought Marla Maples' name was.
Yes, that was it. Moolah.
Oh my God.
See, I'm not totally
Maybe
fried.
she got it from that.
Maybe.
All right. MTV broadcast their match. Cyndi and Lou both jumped in the ring, and Wendy Richter was ultimately triumphant. What began as a chance meeting between Cyndi Lauper and Lou Albino on a flight from Puerto Rico to New York led to a creative partnership and crossover, and ultimately catapulted professional wrestling into the mainstream spotlight. As I'm sure you know, Jessica, Lou Albino played Cindy's father in the video of Girls Just Want to Have Fun.
Yes, he did.
So basically, they met on a plane and Cyndi was like, oh my God, you're insane and I love you. And now I'm obsessed with professional wrestling.
Someone's got to be.
All right. The first WrestleMania at Madison Square Garden featured Cyndi, Hulk Hogan, Liberace, Muhammad Ali, Andre the Giant, and Mr. T, alongside a bevy of professional wrestlers who, until now, had been entertaining a niche group of fans. Professional wrestling in the U.S. dates back to the Civil War. Back then, competitive wrestling matches weren't drawing audiences, so the wrestlers started adding some flourishes. And then they started making the matches much more dramatic. Also, they started fixing matches, which made scheduling so much easier. The bouts were shorter, with fewer injuries, and therefore more profitable. These wrestling matches became very popular on the carnival circuit. Kayfabe, have you ever heard that word before?
Say it again.
Kayfabe.
No.
Kayfabe is carny slang for portraying a staged event as being real. So think about that for a second. When you go see a play, you don't think it's real. You think they're actors doing that thing. Kayfabe is different. You don't know if it's real or it's not real. You don't know exactly what's going on. You get swept up in it. You think it's the real thing.
It's early performance art.
And that's, yeah, totally. Okay. So when Cyndi and Al were beating up on each other, they played it off as a real rivalry. Whether it was or wasn't real, who cares? It was all a fun spectacle. Rivalries between wrestlers are like soap opera stories that unfold at each match. They're chapters to them, and they can go on for years. And they'd extend to their managers and their families, who would often climb into the ring with the fighters, like Cindy did at WrestleMania, wielding her, what was called ultimately, loaded purse of doom. So, thanks to Cindy and MTV, teenagers across the country discovered professional wrestling, and they loved it. It made me kind of think about how Madonna exposed everybody to voguing.
Mm-hmm.
It's this niche thing, and then these celebrities just give it a huge megaphone. But a lot of people just didn't get it. On December 28th, 1984, reporter John Stossel was filming a profile on Hulk Hogan for 2020. Hulkamania, do you remember Hulkamania?
I vividly do.
Was at the peak of its popularity with action figures and T-shirts and videos. During one part of the interview, while the two men walked down Broadway with Hulk Hogan glad-handing fans and signing autographs, Stossel's questions became increasingly pointed. He asked if Hogan cut himself with razors to fake bloody injuries. Hogan realized this wasn't a puff piece. And as soon as he got a chance, he got a hold of Vince McMahon, the owner and impresario of the World Wrestling Federation. He told him the Stossel interview was actually an expose. Vince was furious. He was definitely keen on pushing WWF into the future, but he still had his old-school carny roots, and kayfabe was a huge element of traditional pro wrestling. Wrestlers would never be caught out of character. They would carry the feuds into their everyday life when fans were around. Only in the dressing room were they compatriots. And that's where mainstream reporters like John Stossel just missed the point. Sure, the outcome of the matches is predetermined. Vince McMahon had dozens of scripts in his head about complicated histories and rivalries, and he would decide who would win based on what the most dramatic storyline is. And the wrestlers knew a lot of moves and how to safely slam and hit and flip themselves and others. After all, they had to fight again the next night. But other than that, it is all improvisation. And it requires an enormous level of focus and communication, physical strength and specificity. This, in addition to the showmanship. If you don't have a huge personality, you're not going anywhere in professional wrestling. And it's not like the audience is being duped. They are in it for the ride. A little suspension of disbelief never killed anyone, right?
Mm.
So, here come the buzzkills, starting with John Stossel. He's going to do this huge expose. Wrestling is fake, right? When Hulk Hogan told Vince McMahon that Stossel was aiming to burst the kayfabe bubble, McMahon said to a dressing room full of wrestlers, "Blast him, tear his ass up, stay in character." Flash forward to John Stossel backstage at Madison Square Garden interviewing David Schultz, otherwise known as Dr. D, who was 6'6" and 264 pounds. John Stossel told Dr. D he thought pro wrestling was fake. And Dr. D slapped him in the head twice, knocking him to the floor each time. Stossel scurried away down the hallway, and the whole event was filmed by ABC News.
Oh, my God.
There was nothing fake about Stossel's injuries. He had pain and buzzing in his ears 8 weeks after the attack.
My God.
And he sued WWF.
I was just going to say, are the charges pressed?
Settling for $425,000. Now, Jessica, did you know that Richard Belzer had a talk show?
Yes.
Okay.
I
It
did
was
know
called Hot Properties. And on March 27th, 1985.
My 15th birthday.
Oh, wow. I didn't even, it keeps coming up. Your birthday keeps coming up for some reason.
I know.
He had Mr. T and Hulk Hogan on as guests. Mr. T had joined the WrestleMania extravaganza because he really was. We can talk about Mr. T after this because I went down a Mr. T rabbit hole. Holy
There's a lot. There is a lot there.
And it's not what you expect. It was really cool to find out about, like, first of all, where it all came from. What is this whole Mr. T thing? But also, he wasn't a wrestler. He was an actor. He was a bouncer, and then he was an actor. But he played a wrestler or a boxer in the movies. So they thought, hey, and he had his own action figures and all this stuff. So wouldn't it be such a great pairing to put him with Hulk Hogan? The two men, Hulk Hogan and Mr. T, were promoting WrestleMania, and they were going to be the babyface tag team. Do you know what that means, babyface? Babyface and heel?
Oh, the good guy and the bad guy.
Right. Okay. So they were both, actually, Mr. T and Hulk Hogan are baby faces, both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they were going to be the babyface tag team against heels, Rowdy Roddy Piper, who we've already met, and a wrestler called Mr. Wonderful, who happened to be a heel, but whatever. Okay. Richard Belzer was in full snark mode, as I'm sure you can imagine. Mr. T came out first, and Belzer kind of ribbed him for doing something as silly as pro wrestling. He was just really snarky and rude about it, which put Mr. T in a sour mood.
Uh-oh.
Then Hulk Hogan comes out, and Belzer verbally spars with him for a bit. And remember, Hulk Hogan is he's been doing this kind of wrestle stuff for obviously so much, his entire career, so much longer than Mr. T. So he knows how to be in character, and he's so popular. He's been doing all these interviews and stuff. So he's up for it. He's good. He's not going to get pissed off by Richard Belzer, except Richard Belzer keeps questioning his manhood. And you can see that kind of getting under his skin. But I mean, give me a break.
Is he doing the whole, like, you wear tights and run around and...
No, he's just like, do you have to prove you're a man? It's just like,
God.
Are you overcompensating? It's that kind of thing. All right. Belzer then asks the men to show him a wrestling move. We ain't showing you nothing, said Mr. T. Is that good, Mr. T?
It was
okay.
It was absolutely right up there.
Okay. You want to see some moves? You get a closed circuit ticket.
Nice.
Right. Okay. Do you know what closed circuit is? Because now I do. I never understood what it was.
I only assume that it's CCTV, closed circuit TV, so it's only what you can watch, like, in the arena.
Right, but it's not on your TV.
No.
So what you do is you go, let's say you're in Iowa and you want to see what's happening at Madison Square Garden. They will put up a huge screen. And so you are buying a ticket to
watch the screen.
To see the screen. Yeah, I didn't know that. All these years, closed circuit. I'm like acting like I know what that means. I never knew what that meant.
I love that. I love your
thinking
tone.
it the whole time.
How could I thought that. What did you think it meant?
I didn't even think about it because it didn't affect my life in any way. Closed circuit has never been offering something that I was at all interested in, so I just didn't pursue it. So that was a good answer, Mr. T. That was a good answer.
Yes, go buy a ticket.
Go buy a ticket, Belzer.
Yes.
But Hulk Hogan says to T, I want to make him squeal. Now, Hulk Hogan's voice is a little bit different, and I can't do it right. It's actually steroid voice.
Oh,
have you ever heard steroid? It's like raspy and really low.
Yes.
I cannot
Well,
do
isn't that
it.
a marvel that you can't do it?
Right.
I'm so glad that steroid voice is not part of your skill set.
Right. The men stand. Okay, Hulk Hogan and Richard Belzer stand, and Belzer asks for Hogan's signature move, but Hogan says, I'm going to stick to the basics because the floor's a little hard there and I don't want to get you hurt.
So just for the sake of anyone who doesn't know who Richard Belzer is, he played Detective Munch on Law and Order. And just for the visual, he was tall and exceedingly thin. So Hulk Hogan, like, you needed 4 Richard Belzers next to each other to be the width of Hulk Hogan.
Right. So he's not going to do his signature move. right? Because that's cray-cray.
That's going to kill him.
But what he does do is a very simple move. It's called a sleeper hold.
Oh, does
And-
he knock him out?
He puts him in his sleeper hold and he says, "You just tell me, brother, when you want him to quit screaming." So he says that to Mr. T, right?
Right.
When he releases Belzer a few seconds later, it's not funny. It's
Belzer's
not funny.
unconscious, right?
Completely. And he falls. It's not funny. It's awful. He falls back. It's actually very disturbing when you can watch it on YouTube. He falls back, like flops back and smacks the back of his head on the floor, completely passed out. And then Hulk Hogan rushes to him because he's like, he could have actually killed him.
Right. That's very bad. That was not the plan, in other words.
No, not at all. He's used to, this is like the simplest thing in the world that you do to each other, but
Not to Richard Belzer.
Not to Richard Belzer. Mr. T pipes in, still grumpy. He's like, "He's all right. He's just sleeping," right? When Belzer comes to, Hogan, so he kind of wakes up a little bit, but it's obvious he doesn't know where he is and what's going on. And Hulk Hogan knows something bad has happened. So he kind of picks him up like a rag doll and he slaps him in the face a bit to wake him up. And that's when the audience sees the back of Belzer's head and it's bleeding profusely and there's a puddle of blood.
Oh my God.
Head blood.
Head blood.
On the floor.
Oh my God.
Now remember, nobody knows if it's for real. Because that's this whole friggin' thing about pro wrestling. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. But it was very, very real. And Richard Belzer kind of like, mumbling. And they rush him off stage and they get him to the hospital and he had 9 stitches. And Hulk Hogan, in the meantime, they come back from commercial and Hulk Hogan is apologizing on air saying, "I didn't realize it apparently doesn't do any physical training at all." And then he warns the audience, "If you're not a professional athlete and you're not a professional wrestler, don't try to copy what you see the athletes or professional wrestlers do on TV," which is very responsible of you.
Yes.
Hulk.
Well done, Hulk.
And Richard Belzer sued Hulk Hogan for $5 million. They settled for $400,000.
Oh, like John Stossel.
I know. That's
right.
the going rate
That's
for being
apparently for getting
hit by a
beaten up.
professional wrestler.
Right.
And Richard Belzer bought a home in Beaulieu-sur-Mer, France, which he named Shea Hogan.
Oh, stop it. That's awesome.
All right. So that's my story. There were so many rabbit holes to go down. I could have gotten into like all the steroid stuff, the effect of worldwide wrestling, like the effect that had on this country was actually rather profound. And I would say that we are still dealing with it. This whole kayfabe thing.
Yes, the whole thing of what is real. And
What
we
is
are living
real?
in it politically
Yes.
right now.
And the glorification of violence. In the 90s, I mean, in the 80s, it actually was, let's just say it was kind of pure.
Mm-hmm.
They beat each other up and it was violent, sure, but it didn't get really nasty and racist and misogynist until the 90s when they just kept, because then once they went national, which is the story I just told, they had to keep raising the stakes. And then they had competing federations or whatever, groups. And that's what this Netflix documentary talks about. And so then they keep trying to like raise this. And I mean, 90s is also like, Girls Gone Wild and shit like that. So it gets so disturbing and dirty and that's when Trump comes into it. It's just, yuck, scary. It gets actually kind of scary. And that's also, I mean, I think they were taking steroids the whole time,
Of
obviously.
course they were. No one gets to be that size.
But it didn't get like, it reached a level in the 90s that was completely out of control.
Well, the other interesting thing about what World Wrestling Federation and World Wrestling Entertainment did was it started the backyard.
They're the same thing, by the way. They just changed their name. But anyway, go ahead.
I know this because
okay.
I was asked to package a book for
Oh.
WWE. But what I was going to say is it started the backyard wrestling in the 90s, and normal people were starting their own wrestling federations. Like kids were really damaging each other by hitting each other with folding chairs and throwing them out of rings. And obviously they didn't get it, or that wasn't the point. The point was they wanted to be violent.
And these teenage boys, they're getting riled up on the violence and the sex of it. And then they're hitting each other in the heads with chairs, which, by the way, is a move that is now outlawed because a lot of those wrestlers died before they reached 50. I wonder why. Because again, like it's
like the football
predetermined,
thing,
but that doesn't mean that it's not
dangerous if you're not careful.
There's still impact. Even if you are careful, there's an impact to your body. That is what is happening to you. And they were expected to wrestle every single night, 7 days a week. I mean, that's the carny life, really, which is what it was, fashioned after.
Can I make a couple of movie recommendations?
Sure.
So there are 3 movies, 2 movies and a TV show that have come to mind for anyone who is interested in this. In the 70s, Henry Winkler was in a film called The One and Only, and he's an actor and he can't get any jobs. So he decides to be a professional wrestler because he can create characters. And it shows him on the circuit. And so it's an adorable movie, but it sort of gives a glimpse into what this was before Vince McMahon took over.
Right.
So it's totally fascinating. And Mr. Wonderful is an offshoot of a character that existed a long time ago and kept on being recycled called Gorgeous George.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
So that's that. The second thing is Glow on Netflix.
Of course. It was so fun.
It's so great. And I just, it's the gorgeous ladies of wrestling, which was a real thing, and how these women fought to be able to have the same opportunity to make money.
Right.
And as these guys did. And then the last thing is Florence Pugh did a movie relatively recently, a couple of years ago. Of course, now, it could have been 10 years ago, and I think it's 2 years ago, but it's called Fighting with My Family. And it's based on a real family that are professional wrestlers, and she wants to be in on it. Her brothers are in it, and she winds up, just see the movie.
Okay.
It's a really good, I'm in for the night. I want to see something that's good, but not so fluffy that it makes my brain leak out my ears.
And I will again say, if you're interested in this, watch the Netflix documentary series, Mr. McMahon. And I'll tell you, it escalates, and it escalates to a place that is extremely disturbing and so friggin' predictable, because that's what happens to men with too much power and too much money.
You're bringing up a really good point about the power, because he literally, and I mean that word literally, like the actual use of the word, he literally created a world where the rules were his, and everyone who wanted a piece of the pie had to do what he wanted. And he's a creepy motherfucker.
Oh,
he's a very creepy dude.
No spoilers, but yeah,
he's not a good guy. What is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh God, I don't have one.
If you did, with your lovely voice.
I have on a cruise.
Nice.
So it's not my go-to, but I did it on a cruise.
Okay.
So that counts.
I mean, that only amplifies the importance of the song.
Crazy, I'm crazy for feeling so lonely.
Very nice. So a croony kind of song. All right.
Which actually don't do that.
Oh.
People want upbeat at karaoke.
It's true. They want like living on a prayer.
Ugh.
I don't know.
Yes,
Anyway,
you're right. They do. Or they want to sing it.
so I used to really enjoy doing karaoke in Koreatown here in the city. And it had its moment for me, and then it was over. I was always annoyed because people were always doing Bon Jovi. And I was like,
God, they love it.
Like, why go away? And then I forgot what I was reading. It was for something regarding work. And I can't remember if it was Richie Sambora or I think it was Richie Sambora who said, look, the way that we write songs is really for our fans. And we know the formula. It's called Don't Bore Us, Get to the Chorus.
That's so funny.
Yes.
It's great.
Yes. So anyway, you did Crazy.
I did.
Patsy Cline.
Yes.
Okay. So let's take a little trip back to the late 70s. And we've talked about this on this podcast before. There was a big festering sore in the middle of Manhattan, and it was called Times Square. Times Square was a shithole. That's a technical term. From festering sore to shithole. It was.
What would you call it now?
Not a different kind of festering sore, but at least clean. A clean wound? I don't know. At the end of the 70s, Mayor Ed Koch had a real problem on his hands, and that was Times Square. And the city was bankrupt, as we know, and tourism was down, and it was a dangerous, scary place to be, was New York City. And so he had to figure out, how am I going to deal with this? So he had a few tricks up his sleeve. He increased the police presence by threefold.
Wow.
Support for business improvement districts, known as BIDs. So money was getting pumped into the area to put legitimate businesses in place.
Okay.
While the porn theaters and the very seedy trade, whatever was going on in 42nd Street. I mean, we even have talked about Playland, and like everything was a front for something else. So he was replacing illegit with legit. He had urban renewal initiatives, improving infrastructure and spaces in Times Square and New York where people could congregate that were safe. And he had a campaign against adult businesses specifically. He implemented zoning changes and other regulations trying to make the place more family friendly.
Okay.
And he also did theatrical revitalization. He championed the efforts to restore and promote legitimate theater in Times Square. Now, a lot of the porn theaters in Times Square had once been beautiful, legit theaters in the 20s, 30s, 40s, starting to have a decline in the 50s just because they're, who knows why, I'm not even going to pretend I know why, but really hitting the skids in the 60s. So he wanted to put good stuff in there. All right, so keep this in mind.
Specifically plays or also movies?
No movies.
Okay.
Theatrical. Now, cut to October 8th, 1982.
Okay.
So what's today's date?
October 8th?
Yes. So October 8th of 1982, it was a very important day for one man in New York who was not Ed Koch. On October 8th, 1982, the newspaper critics had their reviews come out for the New York debut of Cats.
Oh.
October 7th was the premiere. It had done very well in the West End, but this was the moment for Andrew Lloyd Webber to see what he could do. Now, he had had his collaborator, Tim Rice, for years, starting in 1968, when together, because their kids were at the same school, they decided to do a much hipper version of a I guess, Christmas or Bible story. And they wrote Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat for the kids.
Which they did at the collegiate school when my brother was there.
Okay, I'm going to blow your mind. I saw it.
So did I. I think we've actually we discovered this on this podcast before. I think.
Isn't it wonderful to have your memory failing? So it's always new.
It's
like, oh my God, that happened.
But my I remember that production. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was so much fun. And my brother he was not in it. He played the violin in the orchestra.
Ah, how fabulous. Yes, I remember just thinking all the boys were very cute. So
it was all male too.
Yes, it was. In the tradition of Hasty Pudding and others like that. So that year, some other very big musicals premiered. There was 9, directed by Tommy Tune. It was an adaptation of Fellini's film 8½. Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat was also on Broadway at this time.
Wow.
It had very briefly been in the West End, and then it opened as a proper, legit show that year on Broadway. Stephen Sondheim's short-lived but then cult favorite, Merrily We Roll Along, that recently had a revival, that debuted and quickly closed. And in 1982, off-Broadway, Little Shop of Horrors debuted. And I've talked about this on the podcast before, that in winter of 82 or early 83, John took me to see it on St. Mark's Place.
Fun.
So, always a place in my heart. But that's what was going on.
That was at the Orpheum, Little Shop of Horrors was. It's where Stomp then ended up.
So there were a lot of musicals going on. A lot was happening. But Ed Koch got the gift he so deeply wanted when Cats opened. Cats became a juggernaut that was responsible for changing Times Square. So we think of it as Now and Forever at the Winter Garden Theater, or the insane advertisements like
when they're all on the subway, all the cats are on the subway.
Oh, they became part of the I Love New York campaign. But I was trying to remember, the only clip I could find, and we've talked about it on this podcast before, is the Grand Hotel advertisement where they started interviewing people outside of theaters, and she's like, I loved it. I'd see it again and again. I got to tell my husband to see it. He'll love it. Oh, so you liked it. I loved it. Better than Cats, better than E.T. I'd see it again and again. It came from that. And in 1986, Saturday Night Live lampooned it. It's like people were coming out of a Broadway show, and it was a mesmerist, a hypnotist, and they come out and they're going, I love cats. I love cats.
Did you see Cats?
No,
I did.
Never saw it. Was never I was not the demographic for that. Did you love it?
The music is amazing and completely incomprehensible, the story, but I didn't care. It was fun.
Yeah,
it's cool.
Which is also what I thought was very interesting so the critic for the New York Times was like, the dancing, the choreography, some of it's good, kind of hackneyed. They said, remember how Terrence Mann was the Rum Tum Tugger?
Yes.
And he got panned.
That's not fair. He was wonderful.
And so the review was basically, the spectacle is unbelievable. The set design, the costumes, and the lighting is what makes this unbelievable.
Memories. I'm sorry.
So that takes us to, what's your karaoke song? Because when I went to summer camp, I was at summer camp in 1982, 1983, and 1984. Every girl in the talent show would get up, stock still, put her arms out in this little weird gesture, like entreating to the audience, in the thin little memories. Oh. Painful.
If I went back in time, I would love to be in the audience watching a little girl sing Memory.
No, you think that.
Oh, come on. There's something about that just feels so nostalgic. It just feels so special.
No, because that was like maybe one. The others were like the girls at theater camp who were belters. You
Are
know,
they
so he's
gonna
like,
belt?
"Meh, meh." It's like Ethel
I
Merman
want
doing it.
all of it. I want all of it. I want to see as many renditions
Well, I have a
by
friend
12-year-old
who
girls
who
as I
has
can.
I have a friend who actually is the son of the people who owned our camp, and he has all of the videotapes. So I will ask John if he can get
Please
us some
do
of that.
not oh my God, that would be amazing.
No, it's true. He actually my God, is it 20 years now? But he invited us all back to camp. He kicked the boys out of the bunk and gave a group of us the bunk. And then and it smelled like nothing you would ever believe. We were like, why are we in this bunk? Oh my God, couldn't you have kicked the girls out? No, but that's another story for another day. So it was very mixed reviews. And it started a trend on Broadway of huge spectaculars that critics did not like and audiences loved.
Interesting.
The other thing that it did, and this is why it really got Times Square going, the marketing behind Cats was brilliant. And what they did, if you remember the poster,
Of course.
all black, cat eyes, and the pupils were dancers. You wouldn't know what the show is about until you went and saw it. And that was part of the mystique. It was about creating this spectacle that you genuinely have no idea what's going on. There were radio spots, there were TV spots. You couldn't escape it. The billboards were every place, and the merchandising. That was one of the first musicals on Broadway that understood the power of merchandising. And every kid, every adult walking around in New York City in the early 80s had something from Cats. There were many, many Cats sweatshirts that were made into Flashdance sweatshirts.
I was going to say, like, it had to have the collar cut out. There's no way that you could have a collar on a Cats sweatshirt.
No, that's just blasphemy. So back to summer camp, there were a lot of those. A lot of girls from Long Island. It was a lot. So the commercialization of Cats brought the mega musical to life. And that was actually what allowed Rudy Giuliani to eventually Disneyfy Times Square. So keep that in mind for just a second, the Disneyfication. So prior to Cats, Andrew Lloyd Webber had Tim Rice as his collaborator. He was the lyricist. His collaboration with Tim Rice most notably yielded Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, Jesus Christ Superstar, and then Evita. When T.S. Eliot became Andrew Lloyd Webber's collaborator, Tim Rice was no longer needed. Bye-bye, Tim. All right, we're going to get back to him in just a second. As a quick aside, his daughter wrote a book called The Lost Art of Keeping Secrets. Her name is Eva Rice, and it is one of the most delightful books that you can possibly read about post-World War II in the 50s, London, and two girls from very different social strata becoming very good friends and moving into what the future of English society will be, or social structure. It's a great, great book. So anyway, before we say that Tim Rice is really out of the picture, let's focus on mega musicals, right? And family tourism, which is the other thing that Cats brought to Broadway. So Broadway had always been the realm of adult entertainment, not adult entertainment, but it's entertainment for...
No reason to bring your kid.
Exactly. However, Cats changed that. Hotels, restaurant, the sheer numbers of people coming in because it was a full family changed radically and overnight. Tim Rice, was he the Andrew Ridgeley of Broadway? Is that what happened to him? Well, There was a lot of hubbub at the time about Andrew Lloyd Webber kicking Tim Rice to the curb.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like, oh, that seems unseemly, especially because Joseph was on Broadway at the same time. So he was on people's minds. But do not cry for Tim Rice. Get it?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
In 1986, his production, he wrote the lyrics for Chess, came to the West End. And the song One Night in Bangkok,
So great.
recorded by Murray Head, became an international hit. I Know Him So Well, recorded by Elaine Page and Barbara Dixon, also massive hit. And then he took a little break. And in 1991, he had a little project called Beauty and the Beast that he put on Broadway. And as if that weren't enough, in 1992, seems like Disney was the right place for him, Aladdin, Tim Rice on Broadway. In 1994, The Lion King.
Yep.
And finally, there was the Evita film. There's also The Road to El Dorado, which was an Elton John musical, and Aida, which was also Elton John, but kind of a flop. So in total numbers of productions, Tim Rice actually comes out on top. But the thing about Andrew Lloyd Webber that all started with Cats that people were blown away by was he was in control of so much of the intellectual property of that particular musical. He earned money on every single thing that happened.
Crazy.
And he reinvested it into himself and his production company, which is where Phantom of the Opera came from.
Right.
So, anywho's, all of those musicals that I just described were family friendly, and they were what changed Times Square. Before we go, let's go back to memory. Now, a favorite karaoke, a favorite talent show hit, but who else recorded it? Well,
Barbara Streisand.
yes, she did. Along with Betty Buckley, Elaine Page was the original Grisabella, her recording very popular. Barbara Streisand in 1981 before it opened on Broadway, followed by Barry Manilow in 1982, which also became a significant pop hit on the Billboard Hot 100 and Adult Contemporary. Folk singer Judy Collins got in on the act, as did, bizarrely, in 1982, Johnny Mathis.
Okay.
Then, in 2004, our friend Celine Dion recorded it. And then, changing reality TV forever, Susan Boyle, Britain's Got Talent.
Is that
used
what
that
her breakout song was?
Yes.
Wow.
And Petula Clark did it in 1983, and Michael Crawford, later known for Phantom of the Opera. So if you want to be in good company, if you want to feel a little fancy, put on your original cast recording of Cats and sing along to memory. But you have to put on your sweatshirt and have a bad perm to really fit in with the talent show crowd.
Please, please, please find a recording of a 12-year-old singing that song.
I'm going to ask, I bet you anything John has it like at his fingertips. So I will ask him.
Oh, I don't have to name names. It'd just be so special.
I would feel like it would be uncool not to. There's one person in particular.
Okay, we can ask.
We're just going to ask her. But like I said, there was no shortage. I hope he has a montage. Wouldn't that be amazing? Oh my God. Anyway, so I just thought it was amazing. I'm sorry, This is my little follow-up, that it's like the weirdest things wind up being that one element that will tip something completely different. Like you don't see it coming. How is this going to help that?
I see what you're saying too. It's like there was no way to know what was going to save Times Square. How would you know that kids, of all things, would save Times Square?
Exactly. And how would you know? Like, all of this money was being pumped into small businesses. And it was like,
It's theater, my friend.
it's theater.
The dying art of theater.
And kids being drawn to musicals on Broadway, although I'm not a fan of Ryan Murphy's work. Glee was very instrumental in bringing a
Seriously.
lot of these Broadway hits to the attention of tweens and teens.
No doubt
And
about
so
it.
their control over Broadway is really what kept it going. And with shows like Wicked, finding a place forever and always.
It's as strong as it's ever been, I have to tell you.
Yeah. We just don't
Yay.
go there, but
I
thank
do,
God
Jessica.
for. Oh, I know you do. I don't, but I mean, as a destination,
I have to go there at least once a week, sometimes twice a week.
do you go to a rehearsal studio in Times Square?
Yes.
Oh, I'm so
That
sorry.
is where my rehearsal studio
all this time,
is.
I just rejected the idea that you had to be there. So I just thought you were like passing through it on your
No,
way.
There's no way to avoid it. I would have to do like a huge loop through Hell's Kitchen and come back the other way in order to avoid Times Square. It can't happen. So yes, I am in Times Square on the regular. And it is, I can't even begin to tell you how crazy it is. Part of it is the lights. Huge LED screens. I guess they're LED, whatever it is. And the quality of the light is so weird. And honestly,
It's a very cold light,
it's so
but
cold.
it's incredibly bright.
And it's not romantic. It's not like, oh, I'm in New York City, ma. I mean, it's nothing like that at all.
Since when are you James Cagney? That was amazing.
It's like I am in the Matrix. This is not a good feeling. Not a good feeling.
No, and having recently been in Las Vegas, I was thinking about this crossover with the Vegas vibe and the Times Square vibe. I tried to project myself into the mentality of someone who's from a small town far, far away from New York City. So it's not even a place that you would ever just drop in for a play. You get there for the first time, and the sheer onslaught has got to be, although in some ways terrifying, thrilling, because it's talk about the Matrix. It's like, it must be like taking, what is it? The red pill, the blue pill, which is the pill?
I don't really know the Matrix.
Oh, the pill that gets you out of the Matrix.
You know much more about the Matrix than I do. I was at rehearsal. We were leaving rehearsal into Times Square, on Sunday, splitting off to our separate subways. And all of us did have a moment on a corner where we were like, imagine if you are a tourist and you're in the middle of this. This is like friggin' overwhelming to us, and we are here all the time. Imagine if you're just like dropped in. No wonder New York gets a bad reputation.
On an up note, and I will leave on this up note. There is a bar restaurant on my corner that has had its dining sheds in disuse for a year.
I know.
And they have become dens like of iniquity, and there are people smoking weed in them 24/7. It's like if they could close a door, they would be hotboxing. Like, it's so insane. I walked outside today and I was like, something's different. The sheds are gone.
Yeah.
So maybe that's thank you. Now we have to get the scaffolding down all over the city, but the sheds coming down, that was a slice of heaven. So we're on an upswing here.
Woohoo!